So in this video, we're going to talk about scales of measurement. These are how we classify our variables. Now, we've talked previously about having variables be continuous or discrete, but what we're really going to talk about here is the 4 different major classifications that we choose our variables in. So the first thing we're going to talk about is nominal and ordinal scales, which are very similar but have a very distinct difference between them. So a nominal scale is categorical data or numbers that are used as identifiers. So these aren't anything that you would be able to like take the mean of or things like that. These are things like age, gender, race, your social security number. They're identifiers. Your hair color, your eye color, things of that nature are nominal. You can't do really anything. I can't take the average of the eye color. Now, you can, however, use numbers to help make your statistical analysis easier. So for instance, if I want to look at gender, I might code everybody who is a female as the number 1 and everybody who is a male as the number 2. Things like that, which would make my data analysis much easier to do when we get to some of the more complex analysis methods. Ordinal scale, very similar in that it is still categorical data and or numbers. The biggest difference between the two is that my ordinal scale can be ranked. So order matters. So ordinal kind of makes sense, right? Ordinal order. So things like ranking in a competition, whether you come in first, second, or third, there is a distinct difference between coming in first and coming in 25th. So you get that ranking. Things like a Likert scale or pain scales, things of that nature are considered ordinal data. And ordinal series like a seats in a stadium is another option there. So again, nominal and ordinal are kind of those categorical things that we're not going to take the mean and things of that like that over, but they are different in that nominal scale is just identifiers. They're just categories, whereas ordinal scale, we can rank them. So when you're looking at the difference between those two, just make sure you understand that's the big difference there. Now, on the other side of that, we have the interval and the ratio scales. These are your numbers. These are the ones that we are going to be able to take the mean and the median and all of that good stuff that we're going to talk about in Chapter 2 when we talk about measures of central tendency. So let's talk about the interval scale first. So this is a scale that represents quantity and has equal units, but for which 0 is simply an additional point of measure. So that means things like a number line or temperature or the sea level. So what it means when it says 0 represents just additional point. So when you think about temperature, when you say something is 0 degrees, okay, 0 degrees is a temperature. 0 sea level, that means you're even with the sea level. So like when we talk about like New Orleans, which is below sea level, so it goes negative. So think about that on your interval scale. It doesn't always have to be positive numbers. We can actually have negative values for our interval scale because we can go below the sea level or we can go below 0 on our temperatures. Now, ratio is a little bit different. It's still a scale that represents quantity, has equal units just like interval does, but 0 represents the absence of something. So for instance, time it takes to run a 5K. So think about it. If it takes you 0 time to run a 5K, that means you didn't run the 5K. That's the absence of running it. Okay? Your height or your weight. The number of siblings. If you have 0 siblings, that's the absence of siblings. You don't have any brothers or sisters. Inches of rainfall. So if I have 0 inches, that's the absence of rainfall. So that's your biggest difference here is you have to ask yourself, is 0 just a number in my data set that's completely feasible, 0 degrees Fahrenheit, or is 0 the absence of something happening? Okay? So this is just kind of a quick little summary visual so you can see. We also have break this up and you can kind of see that they have the 2 different colors here. We have nominal or ordinal, which we actually call qualitative data. That's that categorical, can't do the mean and median. We can't really use it to do a lot of statistical analysis. We can use it to break our groups into different pieces so we can look at, different ages or different genders, but we don't actually use those in our computations. Whereas interval and ratio are considered quantitative data. And that's where we, as in a psychology statistics class, really spend most of our time, is over in the interval and ratio side. So you need to be able to pick those different things out. Now, what I want you to understand is that qualitative data is neither continuous or discrete. Remember, they're just categories. And the only time we really use numbers in those is when we are simplifying them. Instead of using male, female, we use the numbers 1 and 2. Or if we want to do the same thing with race, we could do that. We could assign each race a number associated to it, so you can break the different races up to do your analysis with. On the other side, where we have our discrete or continuous. And interval and ratio can both be discrete and or continuous. It just depends on what we're talking about there. The biggest thing, again, between interval and ratio is, for ratio, 0 means the absence of something. So I want you to always think of that when you're trying to determine which one these are. So let's look and try a practice just a little bit. So let's look at our very first one. It says a meteorologist compiles a list of temperatures in degrees Celsius for the month of May. So I've told you this a couple times because we've talked about temperature as an example. Remember that temperature is going to be on our quantitative because it is a measurement, and it was going to be our interval because 0 degrees Celsius is not the lack of temperature. There is actually a temperature outside, so 0 has a value within our data set. Okay, so a teacher of a class of 3rd graders records the eye color of each student. So the eye color of each student. So what I like to do when I'm doing these, I like to break it up. Is it going to be a nominal ordinal, or is it going to be a interval or ratio? Now remember, interval or ratios are always going to be some type of number. Nominal or ordinal can be a little bit more fluid there on that aspect. So hopefully you're saying nominal because eye color is a category. I cannot rank it. I can't say that somebody with green eyes is better than somebody with brown eyes. That doesn't work. So it's just a category. So that is nominal. So our third one here is a film critic lists his top 50 greatest films of all time. So hopefully we're thinking, if I'm listing them, that automatically knocks out nominal. So now I'm down to ordinal, interval, or ratio. Now remember, for interval and ratio, the distance between two values has to be the same. So when we're looking at something like the 50 greatest movies of all time, does that mean that that one is twice as better as 2, or is one vastly superior than 2? There's no way to say that there's a specific distance between each of the rankings, so that completely knocks out interval or ratio. So we're only down to ordinal. So this would actually be an ordinal form of variable here because it is ranked, but there's no way to determine if the movie ranked 1 and the movie ranked 2 only beat out by a little bit, or it was a lot, according to the critic who put this list together. All right, a local animal shelter keeps track of weights of dogs that come in. Okay. So remember, weight is one of those ones I gave you an example of earlier. We put it on our list of possibilities, and this is going to be a ratio. Remember that the weight 0 would be the absence of weight. So if a dog weighed 0 pounds, you wouldn't have a dog because it can't weigh 0 pounds. That's the absence of weight. Okay, so hopefully this helped you understand these 4 different types of variables. If you have any questions about any of them, please make sure to email me.